The transport ship landed on Zirian Prime with a loud crash that shook the ground for miles. Dust clouds rose into the orange sky as a massive metal doors opened with a hiss. Inside the dark cargo hold, 200 humans sat in silence. They had been traveling for 6 months through space, packed together like animals. Sarah Chen looked out through the small window at their new home. The planet was covered in red rocks and strange purple plants. The air looked thick and dangerous. She had been a military engineer on Earth before the aliens came. Now she was just another slave. "Welcome to your new world," said a voice that sounded like grinding metal. The Kefar guard stood at the door of the transport. It was 8 feet tall with gray skin that looked like stone. Its 4 arms each held a weapon that glowed blue. "You will work in the mines until you die. Most of your kind will not last long here." The humans walked out of the ship in a long line. The gravity was heavier than Earth, making each step feel like they were carrying extra weight. The air tasted of metal and made their throats burn. Around them, the landscape stretched out in all directions. Red mountains rose in the distance. Strange sounds echoed across the empty land. Dr. Marcus Webb walked beside Sarah. He had been studying alien life forms before Earth fell. His glasses were cracked and his clothes were torn, but his eyes still moved constantly, watching everything around them. "Look at the plant life," he whispered to Sarah. "Those purple things have thorns that move. They are following us as we walk." Sarah nodded but said nothing. The Kefar guards did not like it when humans talked too much. She had learned that lesson during the long trip through space. They walked for 2 hours across the rocky ground. The orange sun beat down on them, making sweat pour down their faces. Some of the older humans started to fall behind. The guards did not wait for them. They just kept walking. Finally, they reached a mining camp. It was a collection of metal buildings surrounded by a high fence. The fence had sharp wire at the top that sparked with electricity. Beyond the fence, Sarah could see the entrance to the mines. Dark holes in the ground that seemed to go down forever. "This is where you will live," said the lead guard. Its name was Vextor, and it had been in charge of slave species for over 50 years. "You will wake when the sun rises. You will work in the mines until the sun sets. You will dig for crystals that power our ships. If you find crystals, you eat. If you do not find crystals, you do not eat." An older human man raised his hand. His name was James, and he had been a teacher on Earth. "What about the other species that worked here before us?" he asked. "Where are they now?" Vextor made a sound that might have been laughter. "They are dead. All of them. The Zephyrians lasted 3 months. The Mollusk people lasted 2 months. The blue-skinned Arcturians lasted only 6 weeks. The guard's 4 eyes glowed brighter. "You humans look even weaker than they did." "What killed them?" asked Dr. Webb. The guard was quiet for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice was lower, almost afraid. "The Vorthek, the great beast that rules the deep mines. It has lived on this world for thousands of years. Even we Kefar do not go into its territory." Sarah felt a chill run down her back. "If this beast is so dangerous, why do you send workers into the mines at all?" "Because the best crystals are found in the deep places," Vextor replied, "where the Vorthek hunts. Your people will work the outer edges of its territory. When you hear the sound of its roar, you run. If you are fast enough, you might live another day." The humans were divided into groups of 20 and given small metal huts to live in. Each hut had thin walls and no heat. The beds were just metal slabs with thin blankets. The food was a gray paste that tasted like nothing and barely filled their stomachs. That first night, Sarah lay on her metal bed and listened to the sounds outside. Strange howls echoed across the landscape. Something large moved in the darkness beyond the fence. The guards in their towers kept their weapons ready and their lights scanning the ground. "I have been thinking about what the guard said," whispered Dr. Webb from the bed next to Hayes. "About the other species that died here. 3 different alien races, all supposedly more advanced than humans, all killed by this beast. What is your point?" Sarah asked quietly. "My point is that they all probably tried to deal with this creature the same way. They were afraid, so they ran. They were outmatched, so they hid. They thought like prey animals." Sarah turned to look at him in the darkness. "And you think humans are different?" Dr. Webb was quiet for a moment. "I think humans are the only species that hunts other predators. On Earth, we hunted wolves and bears and sharks. We did not just survive, we dominated. Every other species learned to avoid danger. Humans learned to eliminate it. The next morning came too early. The guards woke them before sunrise by banging on metal bars. The humans were given cups of bitter liquid that was supposed to be coffee and bowls of the gray paste. Then they were marched to the mine entrance. The mouth of the mine was huge, like the opening to a giant cave. Metal tracks led down into the darkness. Old mining cars sat rusted on the tracks. The air that came up from below was warm and smelled of sulfur and something else, something organic and rotten. "Your tools," said Vextor, pointing to a pile of metal picks and shovels. "You will work in teams of 5. Each team takes 1 light. Stay together. Do not go deeper than the red markers on the walls. When you hear the roar, you run." Sarah picked up a heavy pick and tested its weight. The metal was old but still sharp. Dr. Webb chose a shovel and a small hammer. Around them, the other humans selected their tools and formed into groups. "Remember," Vextor called out as the first teams entered the mine, "you are not the first to try. You will not be the last. The beast has been here longer than our civilization. It has never been defeated. Your job is to die quietly and give us as many crystals as possible before you do." As Sarah walked into the darkness of the mine, she felt something she had not felt since Earth fell to the aliens. She felt angry, not scared, not hopeless, but truly angry. The HFY expected them to fail. They expected humans to die like all the others. She gripped her pick tighter and smiled in the darkness. They were about to learn something important about humans. When someone expected them to fail, humans had a habit of proving them wrong. The mine tunnels were darker than anything Sarah had ever seen. The single light each team carried barely pushed back the shadows. Water dripped from somewhere above, and the sound echoed off the stone walls. The air grew warmer the deeper they went. Sarah's team included Dr. Webb, James, a former teacher, Maria, who had been a nurse, and Tom, who used to fix machines. They moved slowly down the main tunnel, following the old metal tracks. Red paint marked the walls every 100 feet, showing how far they could safely go. "Look at these scratch marks," Dr. Webb said, running his fingers along deep grooves in the stone wall. The marks were as wide as his hand and went down the wall for several feet. Something very large made these. Something with claws. Tom held the light closer to the wall. "These scratches go through solid rock. What kind of animal can do that?" "The kind we should stay away from," Maria said nervously. She kept looking over her shoulder at the darkness behind them. They reached their sign work area after an hour of walking. It was a wide chamber where the tunnel split into 3 smaller passages. Crystals grew from the walls like blue and green glass. They sparkled in the light and hummed with energy. "Finally," said James, raising his pick, "let us get these crystals and get out of here." For the next several hours, they worked in silence. The crystals were hard to remove from the rock. Each one had to be carefully chipped away without breaking it. The work was slow and made their arms ache. Sweat poured down their faces in the warm air. Around midday, they heard voices from another tunnel. A team of humans was working in the next chamber over. The sound of their picks echoing off the walls was almost comforting. It meant they were not alone in the darkness. Then the voices stopped. Sarah looked up from her wake. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. They all stood still and listened. The only sound was water dripping and their own breathing. The picks in the next tunnel had gone silent. "Maybe they are taking a break," Tom said, but his voice was uncertain. A new sound came from the direction of the other team. It started as a low rumble, like distant thunder. Then it grew louder and deeper. The sound seemed to come from the walls themselves, vibrating through the stone and into their bones. "What is that?" Maria asked, gripping her tool tighter. Dr. Webb moved toward the tunnel entrance. "It sounds like breathing. Very large breathing." The rumbling stopped. For a moment, everything was completely quiet. Then they heard something that made their blood turn cold. It was a scream. A human scream of pure terror that echoed through the tunnels and went on for far too long, before it was suddenly cut off. "We need to leave," James said, dropping his pick. "We need to leave right now." They grabbed their tools and started moving toward the main tunnel. Behind them, they could hear something large moving through the passages, something that scraped against the walls as it moved. The sound was getting closer. Sarah took the light from Tom and held it high. Stay together. Do not run unless I say run. They moved as fast as they could without making noise. The main tunnel seemed much longer now than it had when they came down. Every shadow looked like it might hide something terrible. Every sound made them jump. When they were halfway to the surface, they heard it again, the deep rumbling breath. But this time it was much closer. It seemed to be coming from the tunnel behind them. There, Dr. Webb pointed ahead. I can see daylight. They moved faster now, almost running toward the mine entrance. The rumbling behind them grew louder. They could hear the scraping sound of something large moving through the tunnel, getting closer with each second. Just as they reached the entrance, they heard a roar that shook dust from the ceiling. It was not like any animal sound they had ever heard. It was deeper than a lion's roar, louder than thunder, and filled with a hunger that seemed to go on forever. They burst out of the mine into the orange sunlight. Other teams were already there, all looking scared and breathing hard. Some were missing members. Sarah counted quickly and realized that at least 8 humans had not come back. Vexthor was waiting for them with other guards. I see you have met the Vorthek, the alien said. Its 4 eyes seemed almost amused. How many did you lose? 8 people are missing, Sarah said angrily. Are you going to help us get them back? The guard made that grinding sound that was its version of laughter. They are not missing. They are dead. The Vorthek does not leave survivors. It eats everything. We heard screaming, James said. That means someone was still alive down there. Yes, Vexthor replied calmly. The beast likes its food to be alive when it eats. It makes the meal more interesting. Dr. Webb stepped forward. We need to know more about this creature. What does it look like? How big is it? How does it hunt? Why do you want to know? Asked the guard. Are you planning to fight it? The Zephyrians tried that. We found pieces of them scattered through 3 tunnels. We want to survive, Sarah said. And to survive, we need to understand what we are dealing with. Vexthor was quiet for a long moment. Then it spoke in a lower voice. The Vorthak is 200 feet long. It has scales harder than our best armor. Its breath melts metal. It can smell fear from miles away. It has lived in these tunnels for over 3,000 years. It has killed every creature that has ever entered its territory. Where exactly is its territory? Dr. Webb asked, taking mental notes. The deep tunnels pass the red markers. But it hunts in the upper levels too, when it is hungry, which is most of the time. That night, the humans gathered in their largest hut. Sarah stood before the group, looking at the faces of people who had lost friends and family members in just one day. We have a choice, she said. We can work carefully, stay in the safe areas, and hope the beast does not come for us. Or we can do something about it. What can we do? Asked Maria. The guard said it cannot be killed. 3 different alien species tried and failed. The guard also said those species tried to fight it, Dr. Webb added. But I do not think they really tried. I think they were too scared to try hard enough. Tom raised his hand. What are you suggesting? Sarah looked around the room. I am suggesting we do what humans do best. We learn everything we can about this creature. We study it. We understand it. And then we find a way to kill it. That is crazy, said one of the miners. We do not have weapons. We do not have armor. We just have mining tools. So did our ancestors when they killed the first mammoth, Sarah replied. Humans have been killing things bigger and stronger than us for thousands of years. We just need to remember how. Dr. Webb nodded slowly. She is right. Every predator has weaknesses. Every creature can be defeated if you understand it well enough. The question is, are we willing to take the risk to learn? The room was quiet for a long time. Outside, they could hear the sound of something howling in the distance. The guards in their towers kept their lights moving across the ground. Finally, James stood up. I lost 3 students today. Good people who trusted me to keep them safe. If there's a chance we can stop this thing from killing more of us, then I want to try. One by one, others began to nod. Not everyone agreed, but enough did. Sarah felt something she had not felt since leaving Earth. She felt hope. Then we start tomorrow, she said. We go back into the mines. But this time, we go to learn. We find out everything we can about this beast, and we make sure it never underestimates humans again. Outside, the howling grew louder, as if the creature could sense that something had changed. The humans were no longer just prey waiting to be eaten. They were becoming something much more dangerous. They were becoming hunters. The next morning, 50 humans volunteered to go back into the mines. Sarah divided them into small teams with specific jobs. Some would collect crystals as usual. Others would study the tunnels and map where the creature moved. A few would examine any remains they could find. Dr. Webb carried a small notebook made from torn cloth and a piece of charcoal to write with. "We need to think like scientists," he told his team. "Every detail matters. How it moves, what it eats, where it sleeps, how it breathes." Tom had spent the night making simple tools from scrap metal. He created measuring devices and small mirrors to see around corners. "If we are going to hunt this thing, we need to know exactly what we are dealing with," he said. The teams entered the mine with more caution than before. They moved slowly and stopped often to listen. Every sound was important now. Every mark on the walls told them something about their enemy. Sarah's team went to the chamber where they had lost people the day before. The scene was worse than they expected. Dark stains covered the floor and walls. Pieces of clothing and equipment were scattered everywhere. But there were no bodies. "It ate everything," Maria whispered, covering her mouth. Dr. Webb knelt down and examined the stains on the floor. "Look at this pattern," he said, pointing with his charcoal. "The blood trail goes this way, toward the deeper tunnels. But see these scrape marks? The creature dragged the bodies. It did not eat them here." Tom found something interesting near the wall. "These scratches are fresh," he said, running his finger along deep grooves in the stone. "And look here, there are scales caught in the rock." Dr. Webb carefully removed the scales with his knife. They were each the size of his palm, dark green and incredibly hard. "These must have come off when it scraped against the wall," he said. "This tells us something important. The creature is so large that it has trouble moving through these tunnels." They spent hours mapping the chamber and the connecting tunnels. They found more scale fragments and measured the scratch marks. Slowly, a picture began to form of their enemy. Meanwhile, another team led by James made a different discovery. They found the creature's feeding area deep in the lower tunnels. It was a large cavern filled with bones from many different species. The bones were cracked and broken, picked clean of meat. "Look at how old some of these are," James said, holding up a skull from an unknown alien species. "This creature has been killing for a very long time." But the most important discovery came from Maria's team. They found claw marks on the tunnel walls that showed how the beast moved. The marks revealed that it did not walk like a normal animal. Instead, it slithered like a giant snake, using its claws to pull itself forward. "This is why it makes that scraping sound," Maria realized. "It drags itself through the tunnels using its claws." By the end of the first day of studying, they had learned several important things. The vortex was enormous, probably as long as the guards had said. It moved like a serpent but had powerful claws. It was too big for the smaller tunnels, which meant it had to use the main passages. And most importantly, it scraped against the walls when it moved, which meant they could hear it coming. The second day brought more discoveries. Dr. Webb's team found something that changed everything. In one of the side tunnels, they discovered a place where the creature had shed its old skin. "Look at this," Dr. Webb said excitedly, examining the massive piece of shed skin. "See these burn marks? And this discoloration? I think this creature has some kind of acid or poison that it produces." Tom studied the skin carefully. "But look here," he said, pointing to several places where the old skin was cracked and damaged. "This skin is not perfect. There are weak spots, places where it has been injured before." On the third day, they finally saw the beast. Sarah's team was working near the deep tunnels when they heard the familiar rumbling sound. Instead of running, they quickly hid behind a pile of rocks and waited. The scraping sound grew louder, and then they saw something that made their hearts stop. The vortex was even larger than they had imagined. Its head alone was the size of a small building. Green scales covered its entire body, overlapping like armor plates. Its eyes glowed yellow in the darkness, and when it opened its mouth, they could see rows of teeth longer than their arms. But they also saw something the Kethvar guards had not mentioned. The creature was old, very old, Some of its scales were cracked or missing. Scars covered parts of its body. One of its eyes was clouded over, probably blind. "It is not invincible," Sarah whispered to herself as they watched the beast disappear into the deeper tunnels. "It can be hurt." The fourth day brought their most dangerous discovery yet. Tom's team found the creature's sleeping area. It was a huge cavern deep in the mine, filled with the warmth that came from the planet's core. The Vorthak lay coiled in the center, breathing slowly. They watched from a safe distance and timed its breathing. They counted how long it slept and when it woke up. They noticed that it always turned its blind eye toward the entrance of the cavern. "It knows that eye is weak," Tom reported back to the others. "It protects it even when it sleeps." On the fifth day, Maria made a discovery that would change everything. Her team was examining the feeding cavern again when she noticed something strange about the bones. "Look at these," she said, holding up several bones that had unusual marks on them. "These are not bite marks or claw marks. These bones were melted." Dr. Webb examined the bones carefully. The acid breath, he realized. But look, the melting only goes so deep. The acid is not strong enough to dissolve bone completely. Tom studied the pattern of the acid damage. "And see how the damage is always on one side? I think the creature can only breathe acid in one direction. Straight forward." By the end of the fifth day, they had learned it enough to start planning. They gathered in their hut that night and shared all their discoveries. "The creature is old and partially blind," Sarah said, drawing a rough map on the floor with her finger. "It moves slowly through the tunnels because of its size. It can only breathe acid straight ahead, and the acid is not as strong as we thought." "It has a regular schedule," added Tom. "It sleeps during the hottest part of the day and hunts when it is cooler. It always uses the same main tunnels to move around." Dr. Webb held up more scale fragments they had collected. "These scales are harder than metal, but they have weak spots where they overlap, and the creature has old injuries that never heal properly." "So what are you saying?" asked James. Sarah looked around at the faces of her fellow humans. "I am saying this beast can be killed. It will not be easy, and it will be dangerous. But it can be done." "How?" asked Maria. "The same way humans have always killed things bigger than us," Sarah replied. "We use our brains. We work together, and we hit it where it is weakest when it least expects it." Outside, they could hear the familiar howling in the distance. But tonight, the sound did not frighten them as much as before. Tonight, they knew they were no longer helpless prey. They were becoming predators. And somewhere deep in the mines, the ancient beast that had ruled this world for thousands of years had no idea that its reign of terror was about to end. The plan took 2 weeks to prepare. Sarah knew they would only get one chance, so everything had to be perfect. The humans worked in secret, hiding their activity from the Kethvar guards who thought they were just mining crystals. Tom spent his evenings making weapons from mining equipment. He sharpened picks into spears and turned metal cables into ropes. He filled empty crystal containers with the explosive powder they used for blasting rock. "These are not much," he told Sarah, "but they are better than nothing." Dr. Webb studied the creature's schedule until he knew it perfectly. "The Vorthak sleeps for 4 hours every day in the deep cavern," he reported. "It always enters through the eastern tunnel and exits through the western one. If we can block both exits, we can trap it." Maria organized teams of runners to carry messages between the different groups. They practiced moving through the tunnels silently and quickly. "When this starts," she told them, "everything will happen fast. We cannot afford any mistakes." James prepared the younger and weaker humans to evacuate the mines completely when the attack began. "This is going to be dangerous," he warned them. "If something goes wrong, you run for the surface and do not look back." The attack was planned for the day when the creature would be hungriest. Dr. Webb had noticed that it killed more often every 7th day, probably because that was when it needed to feed. On the morning of the attack, 40 humans entered the mines. They moved in small groups, each with a specific job. Some carried the improvised weapons and explosives. Others brought tools for blocking tunnels. A few went ahead to watch the creature and report on its movements. Sarah led the main attack team. She carried a spear made from a sharpened mining pick and several containers of explosive powder. Her heart was beating fast, but her hands were steady. She had been preparing for this moment for weeks. The first part of the plan went perfectly. The creature was in its sleeping cavern, coiled up with its blind eye facing the entrance as always. Teams of humans quietly moved to both tunnel exits and began building barriers from rocks and metal beams. Tom's team placed explosive charges at key points in the cavern ceiling. If they could bring down part of the roof, it would trap the beast and injure it at the same time. He worked carefully, knowing that one mistake could kill them all. Dr. Webb watched the creature's breathing and counted the minutes until it would wake up. 20 minutes, he whispered to Sarah. We need to be ready. But then something went wrong. One of the younger humans accidentally knocked over a metal tool. The sound echoed through the cavern like a bell. The vortex huge had lifted up, and its good eye opened. It is awake, Dr. Webb said urgently. We have to move now. The creature began to uncoil itself, moving faster than they had ever seen it move before. Its massive body scraped against the cavern walls, sending rocks falling from the ceiling. The yellow eyes glowed brighter as it searched for the source of the noise. Light the charges, Sarah shouted to Tom. Tom struck his flint and lit the fuses on the explosive charges. 10 seconds, he called out, then began running toward the exit. The vortex saw the humans moving and let out a roar that shook the entire mountain. It moved toward them with surprising speed, its huge mouth opening to show those terrible teeth. The charges exploded just as the creature reached them. Tons of rock fell from the ceiling, crashing down on the beast's back. The vortex screamed in pain and anger, a sound that hurt their ears and made their bones vibrate. But the falling rocks did not stop it. The creature was stronger than they had hoped. It pushed through the rubble like it was moving through water. Some of its scales were cracked, and dark blood flowed from several wounds, but it was still very much alive and very angry. Plan B, Sarah shouted. Everyone spread out. The humans scattered in different directions, using a tactic they had learned from studying pack hunters on Earth. Instead of running away, they surrounded the creature and began attacking from all sides. Tom threw his spears at the weak spots between the scales. Maria and her team used ropes to try to tangle the creature's movements. James led a group that attacked the beast's blind side with picks and hammers. The vortex spun around, trying to face all its attackers at once. Its massive tail swept across the cavern floor, sending humans flying. But every time it focused on one group, another group attacked from a different direction. Sarah saw her chance when the creature turned to snap at Tom's team. She ran straight at its head, jumping over a sweep of its tail. The beast opened its mouth to breathe acid at her, but she was ready. At the last second, she ducked to the side. The stream of acid missed her and hit the cavern wall instead, melting the rock. While the creature's mouth was still open, Sarah threw 2 containers of explosive powder directly down its throat. The explosion inside the vortex mouth was muffled but powerful. The creature reared back, clawing at its own throat and making sounds of pain they had never heard before. Dark blood poured from its mouth and nose. But it was still not dead. The wounded beast became even more dangerous, thrashing wildly and destroying everything around it. Its claws tore huge chunks from the cavern walls. Its tail smashed through the rock barriers the humans had built. It is too strong, Tom shouted over the noise. We cannot kill it this way. Dr. Webb had been watching the creature's movements, even in the chaos of battle. He noticed something important. Look at how it moves, he called out to Sarah. It keeps protecting its left side. There must be an old injury there. Sarah saw what he meant. Every time the creature turned, it favored its right side. There was a pattern of older scars along its left flank where the scales had never grown back properly. Everyone attack the left side, she ordered. That is where it is weakest. The humans regrouped and focused all their attacks on the creature's left flank. They used their remaining explosives and weapons to target the scarred area. Tom managed to drive a spear deep between 2 loose scales. Maria's team used acid from the creature's own breath, which had pooled on the floor, to weaken the damaged scales. The vortex movement became slower and more desperate. It was losing too much blood and taking too much damage. The ancient beast that had terrorized this world for thousands of years was finally meeting something it could not defeat. But the creature had one last trick. With a final burst of energy, it began to collapse the entire cavern. If it was going to die, it would take the humans with it. The ceiling is coming down, James shouted. We have to get out. Rocks began falling everywhere. The exit tunnels were blocked. The humans found themselves trapped in a collapsing cavern with a dying but still dangerous beast. Sarah looked around desperately. They had come so close to victory. They could not fail now, not when they were so close to proving that humans could not be beaten. Then she saw it, a crack in the cavern wall where the creature's acid breath had weakened the rock. It was narrow, but it might be wide enough for humans to escape through. "This way!" she shouted, leading the survivors toward their only chance of escape. Behind them, the Vorthek gave one last roar of rage and pain before the falling rocks finally buried it forever. The reign of terror was ending. But first, they had to survive to tell about it. The crack in the cavern wall was barely wide enough for a human body. Sarah pushed through first, scraping her shoulders against the rough stone. Behind her, rocks continued to fall as the cavern collapsed. The sound of the dying Vorthek's final roars echoed through the mountain. "Move faster!" Tom shouted from behind her. "The whole place is coming down." One by one, the surviving humans squeezed through the narrow opening. Maria helped the injured ones through while Dr. Webb counted heads to make sure no one was left behind. 31 humans had entered the cavern to fight the beast. 26 came out alive. The crack led to a small tunnel that connected to the main mine shaft. They crawled through darkness for what felt like hours, following the faint current of air that meant they were heading toward the surface. Some were bleeding from cuts and bruises. Others had broken bones from falling rocks. But they were alive. When they finally emerged into the orange sunlight of Zirian Prime, they found chaos waiting for them. The explosions and the creature's death roars had been heard throughout the mining camp. Kethvar guards were running everywhere, shouting orders in their grinding language. Vexthor stood at the mine entrance with a squad of heavily armed guards. When it saw the humans coming out, its 4 eyes widened in disbelief. "You were supposed to be dead," it said. "The beast should have killed you all." Sarah stepped forward, covered in dust and blood but standing tall. In her hand, she carried a piece of the Vorthek scale that she had broken off during the fight. "The beast is dead," she said simply. "Impossible," Vexthor replied, but its voice was less certain than before. "The Vorthek cannot be killed. It has lived for thousands of years." "It lived for thousands of years," Dr. Webb corrected, limping forward. "Now it is just meat and bones buried under a pile of rocks." The other Kethvar guard began to whisper among themselves in their harsh language. They had never seen their commander look uncertain before. Vexthor had controlled dozens of slave species over the decades, and they had all feared the beast that lived in the deep mines. "Prove it," Vexthor demanded. "Bring me the creature's head." Tom laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "The head is under 1,000 tons of rock. But if you want proof, we can show you its lair. We can show you where the great beast died like any other animal." Word of the impossible victory spread quickly through the mining camp. Within hours, ships began arriving from other Kethvar colonies. Military commanders and government officials came to see for themselves. They could not believe that a group of primitive humans had accomplished what their advanced civilization had never even attempted. The Kethvar sent their own teams into the mines with heavy equipment and sensors. They dug through the collapsed cavern and found exactly what the humans had said they would find. The massive corpse of the Vorthek lay buried under the rocks. Its reign of terror finally ended. The discovery sent shockwaves throughout the Kethvar collective. For thousands of years, they had built their empire on the belief that some challenges could not be overcome. They had accepted that certain creatures were too powerful to fight. They had learned to work around obstacles instead of removing them. But humans had done something different. When faced with an impossible enemy, they had studied it, planned carefully, and then fought it until it was dead. They had refused to accept that anything was truly unstoppable. Within days, reports began coming in from other Kethvar worlds. Slave species that had been quiet for generations were beginning to ask questions. If humans could kill the unkillable beast of Zirian Prime, what other impossible things might be possible? On the mining world of Arcturus 7, the blue-skinned Drakmari slaves stopped working and demanded better food. On the gas giant Nephis, the floating tentacle people began forming groups and making plans. On 17 different worlds, alien slaves looked up at their Kethvar masters and wondered why they had been so afraid for so long. The collective council of dominators held emergency meetings on their home world. Ancient aliens who had ruled the galaxy for millennia suddenly found themselves facing questions they had never had to answer before. "The humans must be contained," declared High Dominator Zekthol. "Their influence is spreading too quickly. Other species are beginning to think rebellion is possible." How do we contain them? Asked another council member. They have already proven they can kill what we thought was unkillable. What if they decide to turn their attention to us? That question hung in the air like poison. For the first time in their long history, the HFY Collective was afraid of a slave species. Meanwhile, on Zirian Prime, the humans continued their work in the mines. But everything had changed. The HFY guards no longer gave orders with the same confidence. They watched the humans with new eyes, seeing not weak primitives but something far more dangerous. Sarah became the unofficial leader of the human workers. She organized better work schedules, negotiated for improved food, and established safety protocols. When the guards complained, she simply pointed to the sealed entrance of the deep mines where the Vorthak had died. "We did your job for you," she would say. "We made this world safe. The least you can do is treat us with respect." Dr. Webb spent his time documenting everything they had learned about the beast. He wrote detailed reports about its weaknesses, its behavior, and how it had been defeated. Copies of these reports somehow found their way to other worlds, carried by HFY traders who did not realize what they were transporting. Tom organized the other humans into a more effective workforce. They improved the mining equipment, made the work safer, and increased crystal production. The HFY found themselves in the strained position of relying on the same humans they had expected to die within weeks. Maria established a medical center where humans could receive proper treatment for injuries and illnesses. When the HFY tried to shut it down, she reminded them that healthy workers produce more crystals than sick ones. 6 months after the death of the Vorthak, a new ship arrived at Zirian Prime. It carried a delegation from the Collective's highest council. They had come to study the humans and understand how such a primitive species had accomplished the impossible. The delegation was led by High Dominator Zekthal himself, one of the most powerful beings in the known galaxy. He stood before the assembled humans in the mining camp and studied them with ancient eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. "You have caused considerable disruption throughout our empire," he said in perfect human English. "Species that have been obedient for centuries are now questioning our authority. They point to your victory over the Vorthak as proof that rebellion is possible." Sarah stepped forward to face the alien ruler. She was dirty from a day's work in the mines, wearing simple clothes and carrying a mining tool. But she looked the High Dominator directly in the eyes without fear. "Maybe they are right," she said quietly. "Maybe rebellion is possible." The two beings stared at each other for a long moment. The most powerful ruler in the galaxy and a human slave who had helped kill an unkillable beast. Around them, HFY guards shifted nervously, uncertain whether they should intervene. Finally, High Dominator Zekthal spoke again. "What do you want?" "We want to be treated like intelligent beings instead of animals," Sarah replied. "We want fair food, safe working conditions, and the right to make our own choices about our lives." "And if we refuse?" Sarah smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Then you will learn that the Vorthak was not the most dangerous thing on this world. You will learn that humans can be much more creative when we put our minds to it." The High Dominator considered this for a long time. He had ruled for over 2,000 years, and he had never been threatened by a slave before. But he had also never encountered a species that could kill something his own people had considered a force of nature. "Very well," he said finally. "We will negotiate." As the sun set over Zirian Prime, Sarah looked around at her fellow humans. They had come to this world as slaves, expected to die quickly and quietly. Instead, they had done something that would be remembered throughout the galaxy for generations to come. They had taken the impossible and made it possible. They had shown the universe that humans did not accept limitations that others imposed on them. And most importantly, they had proven that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is underestimate the species that refuses to give up. The age of HFY dominance was ending. The age of humans was just beginning.